Hello, welcome to Plot with me. It's Colin. I'm back again after a somewhat of a longer hiatus than I expected. But we are here in Bloomsbury and we're going to have a wander around and show you some of the history and some of the lovely architecture. And yeah, just tell you some stories about the area. So as I say, it's been a while, but after many emails, complaints and various other things, my internet got fixed. So here we go. So as I say, we're in Bloomsbury, which is famous for, I suppose, intellectuals. University College London seems to own a whole lot of it, and the medical establishment. But let's get started. We're in this lovely little part here. Now, I wasn't even going to talk about this, I wasn't aware of it until just now. But this is St Pancras Church. Now, let me see if I can get a decent view for you. And I spotted this. Now, how's about that for an entrance to a church? And it's not even the main entrance, it's just the back entrance, but how grand is that? So at some point I'll have to get the history of that, and maybe we'll start another tour and walk in a different direction. But those four women adorning holding up the sort of, what would you call it, the roof above. And I have no idea what the history behind that is, but we'll find out. Okay, so we're up. We're going to start on Woburn Walk, but I just thought I'd start and show you this place. And it says the 20th Middlesex Arts RV. Okay, and it's called The Place with the motto Dancing for Life. Well, obviously that's my outlook on life, but it's a lovely building, and I'm going by what it says up above there, built in 1888, it says above the central window near the top, and even the building next to it, 1890, very nice too, and yet in a completely different style. But we're more interested at the minute in Woburn Walk, so this is sort of some of the buildings leading up to it. You can see the very old style of it. And so tucked away from the noise of the main roads, just down a little side street, is this. And this dates from 1822, and it's basically as it was. Still got the old gas lighting. Apparently they hired out the whole street and did filming some scenes of the drama series Bridgerton here. And it is absolutely beautiful. You know, it's got all the old features. So, 1822 in architectural terms, that would be sort of Georgian architecture. Within that sort of period, this is generally considered to be in the Regency style, which was sort of 1811 to 1820. It's called Regency because that's when the Prince Regent was temporarily on the throne, while his father was incapacitated with what generally considered to be madness. Hence the Alan Bennett play and later movie, The Madness of King George. Now, some notable people have lived here. I can't say I knew too much about them, but Dorothy Richardson, it says on the plaque above here, to show you that. It says Dorothy Richardson, 1873-1957, lived here. She was a writer and she lived here 1905 to 1906. University of Ulster, strange, okay, from my neck of the woods. So she is deemed to be one of the pioneers of what you would call like sort of stream of consciousness writing, which I suppose would go along with the likes of Ulysses and that type of work. Apparently she wrote about 13 semi-autobiographical novels or books, and she basically considered them to be one book. It's just one, it's 13 elements of the one book. And over here, this guy I know nothing about. It says George Jacob Holyoake, 1817-1906, radical journalist, secularist, and promoter of the cooperative movement, lived here from 1850 to 61, and that was put there by the National Secular Society. So there you go. Now, if we swing round, is the more famous one. And there we go, the big bad boy. William Butler Yeats, Irish poet and dramatist, lived in this house, then known as 18 Woburn Buildings, from 1895 to 1919. So he would have been here when he wrote the famous poem The Second Coming, which starts with, turning and turning in the widening jar, the falcon cannot hear the falconer, the centre cannot hold, things fall apart. And that was written in the aftermath of the First World War, and it was his sort of reflection on the fact that he believed that history comes in cycles, and usually at the end of one cycle the next bit is sort of tumult and chaos and basically not good times. All the social norms get knocked to one side and everything starts to change. And when you consider that the First World War laid the seeds for the Second World War, he wasn't wrong. Now, I can't say I'm too familiar with the works of Mr. Yeats. From what I've read about him, and please feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, he's hugely revered among many poets and the literary types. And from what I've read, he basically was trying to change the form of poetry. In the same way that around the same time, Braque and Picasso were trying to change the form of art and developed Cubism. It was just sort of, I suppose, coincidental time of great sort of, what would you say, like sort of artistic sort of reinvention. People looking for change and trying to do new things. And Yeats was trying to do it with poetry. But he is, as I say, hugely admired. Although I'm not familiar too much with his work. Oh, and for any of you wondering what that poem was called, it's called The Second Coming, which is 100 years later, and I would say the words of that poem still resonate today in terms of possible change. Right, we're going to nip across the road. I'm afraid for the next minute or so it's going to be a bit noisy until we get on to the back streets again. So we're on the main road, which I believe, if memory serves, is called Woburn Place. So that was Woburn Walk. I suppose one of the other things that there's lots of in Bloomsbury is hotels. We've just walked past about 3 or 4, and there's many more dotted down this road. I'm not sure where the Woburn name comes from. I'll have to look into that. But this is Woburn House, and there's a plaque on the end of it, so I just thought we'll have a look at that. There we go. So, in memory of auxiliary firemen Stanley Harold Randolph and Harry Richard Skinner, who died from injuries received as a result of enemy action near the site on the night of 16th to 17th of April 1941, while serving under Station 73 in Euston. So that would have been part of the Blitz, because the Blitz lasted from about September 1940 to May 1941. So that will be, obviously, this will be one of the places where the bombs fell, and they died as a result, no doubt fighting the fires. And who knows, maybe some ordnance went off as well. So that's a nice little memorial to them. Now this building over here is the British Medical Association, who represent the sort of doctors of the country. I have to say, haven't been covering themselves in glory too much lately, but let's not get into current politics. But this is the BMA headquarters. At the time, like, the number of sort of what you would call critics called this a bit of a monstrosity of a building. I have to say, I think it looks quite nice. You know, I'm sure if they saw some of the things that are being built now, they might change their mind. But this is the BMA house. Now I'm going to try and nip over here, because I want to show you this other plaque. Now we have just reached what is known as Tavistock Square. Okay, and if you can see on the wall across the way, just about there, there's a blue plaque, and it says 1851 to 60, Charles Dickens, novelist, lived in Tavistock House near this site. Honestly, that man lived all over London. I know that while he was here, he wrote books like Hard Times, Bleak House, Little Dorrit, and of course the big one, A Tale of Two Cities, in terms of its popularity. So yeah, so obviously this was quite a, you know, he was pretty successful by then. So this is obviously quite a, you know, gentrified place to live, Tavistock Square. And I have to say, it's not too bad now. But as I said at the start, when you think of sort of Bloomsbury, obviously there was the Bloomsbury set. So you sort of think intellectuals, which is why I hang out here, obviously. And then you got the BMA, there's lots of hospitals and medical places around, and University College London and other colleges nearby. So it has got that gentrified feel. Now this is Tavistock Square itself. We're going to have a little wander around because there's a few memorials and statues we're going to look at. And this is pretty much gotten the title of the Peace Square these days, because there are a number of memorials that relate to sort of anti-war sentiment. This was built around about 1820, and let's see, history prior to the 1550. I'll do a close-up in case any of you want to pause and read this. It was part of Tottenham Manor before being granted the first Earl of Southampton, Thomas Robley. So that was Henry VIII gave him the land in the 1500s. Okay. And that tells you about how Thomas Cubitt was only the person who was sort of responsible for building many of the houses and built these squares. This one and the one we're going to go to called Gordon Square. And Cubitt apparently was the first sort of, I suppose you call them developer as such, to have a permanent workforce to build houses and, you know, to build these sorts of places. Now while we're here, it's nice and quiet, I'll just give you a brief history of the area. So hold on, let's spin right now. Look at me rolling like a bushes. Okay, so essentially this land of Bloomsbury, the whole area, goes back over 1,000 years. So you're going back to the time of the invasion of William the Conqueror, 1066, and in 1066 it's basically a French invasion from Normandy. Long story, whole book's about it, but basically conquered England, and then obviously the King William, he started divvying out parcels of land to people, and by, I believe it was in the early 12th century, or sometime in the 12th century, it got given to what became the first Earl of Southampton, and his family held on to it. Oh, and I should mention before we get on to that, let's backtrack a bit. 1086, you have what's called the Domesday Book. So that was William the Conqueror. Basically, he had conquered England, and then he basically thought to himself, well, so what exactly have I got? And what was probably the biggest census ever taken of everything that was throughout the land, of what he owned, essentially. So every house, every hovel, every cart, every shed, every cow, every pig, every chicken, everything was sort of tallied, taken, a record was made of it. And this became known as the Domesday Book for the locals, that's what the natives called it. And this area here, Bloomsbury, the guy he had given it to was called William de Bloomsbury. So that's Bloomsbury was where you get the blooms from. And then there was a little sort of affectation after that, which I can't remember, which basically meant the land of Blooming, but it must have sounded something like berry, and from that we get Bloomsbury. So in 1086, Domesday Book, this land was described as having lots of fine vineyards and a wood with enough room for 100 pigs. As you can see, it's kind of changed since then. So that was given to this guy, William de Bloomsbury, in the sort of 12th century. Stays in his family, and then come the 1500s, Henry VIII. Thank you. Henry VIII gives it to one of his supporters, and he was the first Earl of Southampton, and that's why there's a number of streets and whatnot called Southampton Row and various other things. And it passes down his family line for the next couple of hundred years, at least in the next 150. And by the 1660s, the fourth Earl of Southampton is starting to develop the area, starting to build things, like squares and that sort of thing. But then passed to his daughter when he died, and she married a guy called Lord William Russell, who was, here we go again, aristocracy, the first Earl of Bedford. And that's why you've got lots of places named after Bedford, because we have Bloomsbury Square, we have Bedford Square. But Henry Russell, we have Russell Square. So he basically marries the daughter. All that land now becomes part of his domain, because that's the way things were. You know, if you were a girlie and you got married, everything that was hers is now his. And he then gets executed in 1583, and his wife continues to manage the estate until she died in 1823. And 1723. And then basically the family trust, the Russell sort of family trust, the Bedford estate starts to manage it from that point onwards. Okay, so you can see that certainly for the last 450 years, a lot of the land has been in the same family, which sort of ties in with the little story about one of the biggest, probably the biggest landowner in London, a guy called the Duke of Westminster. And there's a little story about how some bloke asked him, you know, how do I go about acquiring the sort of wealth and vast riches that you have? And the Duke's response, no doubt with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, was, well, it helps if one of your ancestors was the best mate of William the Conqueror. So that's how to do it, folks. So there we go, potted history of Bloomsbury. Now, let's have a look at the memorials. The first one, which doesn't seem to be getting treated with the Is that flowers? I was going to say I'd not treat it with too much respect, but no, that's flowers. My mistake. And it says 7th of July 2005. Opposite this place, a bus was bombed, killing, and then it's got the names of all the people. And this was basically a suicide bombing. I remember being on the news. This was basically a suicide bombing. Sort of Islamic based back in 2005, so that was 20 years ago. And this is the plaque sort of noting it. I can see there's one on the other side of the street as well, on the fence opposite. Obviously noting the same thing. I have to say, it's a Sunday morning, and you know, it's quite noisy. Now, just looking there, I know there's there's a memorial I was after, so we'll go this way. Next, I'd like to say the Peace Park. Oh, a very enterprising squirrel on that bin. You go for it, mate, I'm not going to bother you. Blimey, squirrels everywhere, on the bin, on that post. We'll see, let's get some good food around here. Now this next memorial is devoted to conscientious objectors, to all those who have established and are remaining the right to refuse to kill. Their foresight and courage gave us hope. This stone was dedicated on the 15th of May 1994, International Conscientious Objectors Day. And it's dedicated to conscientious objectors all over the world. So that's that one. There we go, bit of wildlife photography for you. Not quite David Attenborough, but we're doing okay. And here we have another peace-loving type, and this is Mahatma Gandhi. So, as I say, most of the, all the sort of statues pretty much devoted to lovers of peace. Now there is also a cherry blossom, but because it's not in bloom, and my knowledge of sort of trees isn't that good, I'm not sure which one it is. If we'd been here back in the spring and we'd seen it in bloom, I would have been able to tell you, but the cherry blossom was to sort of signify it was devoted to Hiroshima and the dropping of the bomb. And as I say, I'm not very good with trees, amongst many, many other things, but I know there is a cherry blossom somewhere in here, and that's what it's for. So again, another anti-war statement. And if any of you have spotted it while I've been wandering around, let me know. There's one other statue up here. I have to say, from the road it's overgrown and you can't see it so much, but thankfully she looks both ways in this statue. So I'm hoping we can see her from this side. There she is. Let's see if we can get in the shade. This is probably the only one that isn't directly to do with anti-war sentiment. Yep. Well, trying to get away from the sun's glare. So, Louisa Brandreth Aldrich Blake, 1865-1925, Dean of the London Royal Free Hospital School of Medicine for Women, Consulting Surgeon Royal Free Hospital and Surgeon to Elizabeth Garrett Anderson. The path of the just is as the shining light. So basically, in terms of women and medicine, she would have definitely been one of the pioneers, and obviously rose to the very top. So, well done her. The only time you tend to see the story of pioneering women in medicine on TV, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, there's probably been some others, but the one that jumps out where you see it most often is Murdoch Mysteries, with his other half, Julia, for any of you that watch that. Oh, there's another memorial. Who's that to? Oh, come on, let's have a look. Oh, that will be Virginia Woolf, because she lived in the square for a while, amongst numerous other places. And obviously, whenever you think the Bloomsbury set, it's Virginia Woolf that it is most identified with. The, again, very revered writer who lives here amongst other places in the area, because as we saw in our Fitzrovia tour, she lived there as well. And yeah, Fitzrovia is not that far away. In fact, a lot of people can, we talk about Fitzrovia and Bloomsbury all in the same breath. So, like I say, very revered writer, ended up killing herself, put stones in her pockets and jumped in a river, which is a bit tragic. But they obviously lived how they wanted to live. Like, one of her quotes was basically about how they were couples who lived in squares and had triangular relationships. So obviously the social norms didn't apply to them. Right, so we're going to go out on the road. And opposite there's another hotel, and it has, I don't know if you can see just above that potted plant, it's got the blue plaque for Virginia Woolf and Leonard Woolf, because the house that she lived in was obviously demolished, and now it's a hotel. Over on the left there, the Wolf and the Whistle is a pub. That's part of the hotel. I wonder if she would have just rolled her eyes at that sort of bad pun. Well, nobody's moving. Oh, of course they start moving as soon as I start walking. Okay. So we are going to go to our next square, which is Gordon Square, which again, built by Thomas Cubitt, probably around the same time, 1820, as they were developing Tavistock Square that we've just been in. And you see what I mean about medicine universities. SOS, University of London, not sure what that means. Doctoral School. So this is Gordon Square. Nice houses, aren't they? These big front entrances. I'm sure there's an architectural term for that, but I just don't know. So here it says, Lytton, what's that, Strachey? I would say Strachey. 1880-1932, critic and biographer lived here. So he would have been part of the Bloomsbury set. Next door. So, let's see, not shiny. It says, here and the neighbouring houses during the first half of the 20th century, there lived several members of the Bloomsbury group, including Virginia Woolf, Clive Bell and the Straceys. So obviously the Straceys were next door. Clive Bell was an artist and a critic. I think Strachey was a biographer. I think he wrote some famous thing all about Victorian values, and if I remember it sort of changed the nature of biographies, if memory serves. Now, this one says John Maynard Keynes, who's a giant in terms of economics over here. 1883-1946, economists lived here. 1968, so for 30 years. If memory serves, I think Virginia Woolf lived here for a year or two, although it's not mentioned on a plaque. And then he lived here later. But again, he was part of the Bloomsbury set. Like I say, intellectuals, in different fields. And underneath, it says Vanessa Bell, 1879 to 1961. Oh, she had a good long life. And Duncan Grant, 1885 to 1978. Again, artists lived and worked here. So economists, artists, writers, biographers, critics, that sort of thing, all living around here. Now, we want to nip into Gordon Square. And again, there's a couple of statues we'll check out. There we go. So, this is Nur Inayat Khan, 1914 to 44, and she received the George Cross, one of the top medals, an MBE and the Croix de Guerre. So basically, during the war, Second World War, I'll come round a bit where it's not so sunny and not so much of a glare. During the Second World War, she signed up for what was essentially the British Secret Service, Special Operations Executive as it was known, and she volunteered to be dropped into France and become a radio operator, which was a very, very dangerous thing to do. But she volunteered for it and went over and did it, and she was basically sold out by someone and was captured by the Gestapo. She was tortured, and that was in 1943, and then her and 3 of her colleagues were executed at Dachau concentration camp in 1944. So by all accounts, it seems to be even under torture. She didn't give anything away. There we go. Noor Inayat Khan was an SOE agent infiltrated into occupied France. She was executed at Dachau, and her last word was liberté. So, very brave young woman who basically, in times of war did what she wouldn't have had to do. But I would suspect that the female operatives were sort of harder to catch, than the male ones, I'm guessing, because as a general rule, I suppose undercover operatives would have been male, and that's what this Gestapo would have been looking for. But I could be completely wrong about that and just talking utter rubbish, so feel free to tell me. So again, I'll just do a close-up of this for anybody that wants to pause and have a look. Telling you a bit about the wildlife and the plants here. Alright. Now. Oh yes, and the reason why Noor is here is because she lived nearby in her younger days. I think she was born abroad, if memory serves, but her family ended up living here. And here we have our last monument in this square. So, Rabindranath Tagore, Indian poet, philosopher, and first Nobel laureate from Asia. So he was born in Calcutta, first non-European to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. And the reason why they've got a memorial here is much like Gandhi. He studied, well, in his case briefly, at University College London. That was also where Gandhi studied before he got called to the bar at Inner Temple. But basically, because University College London is all around here, that's why he's got this statue here. Right, how are we doing? Right, so I would say we don't have, just sort of working out battery time, bear with me. Right, I think that'll do us, oh hold on, sunshine. I think that'll do us for this walk. That'll do Bloomsbury Part 1, and I think what I'll do is I'll change the battery, and then we'll do Part 2 next, so feel free to join me for the second one, and no doubt there'll be a link to some other videos popping up at some point now. Alright, so if you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and we'll pick up on Part 2. Bye.